Modern marriage, the one society pushes as the ultimate goal of fulfillment, is nothing more than a carefully crafted psychic prison, an institution where men, without realizing it, volunteer to serve their sentence. Freud already suspected this when he exposed the price we pay for entering civilization: renunciation, repression, sacrifice. But today, the weight of this renunciation is not shared. It falls almost exclusively on men's shoulders. When Freud said that civilization is built on the repression of instincts, he was showing that living in society demands a price, relinquishing raw desire in the name of collective order. But remember, if civilization already demands this, marriage doubles the burden. It's like a microcosm of society, only with a brutal asymmetry. When a man marries, he surrenders his freedom, his time, his money, and most seriously, his psychic vitality. The promise of eternal love functions as a narrative that masks reality. Marriage is not about love, but about control. The civil contract, legitimized by the state, formalizes a kind of pact where the woman is protected, benefited, and often shielded from consequences, while the man becomes the guarantor of everything. He is the one who pays, literally and symbolically, the bill. Think about it. A man marries believing he's embarking on a life together, but deep down, he's signing his own sentence. Freud already showed how the unconscious works silently, and it's there that the great trap lies. The desire for recognition, the need to feel complete, the myth of the other half, and all these are psychic ghosts that push a man into the gilded cell called marriage. Modern marriage, far from being a space of pure affection, is a theater where the man plays expected roles: provider, protector, emotional pillar. The woman, in turn, has guarantees. If love ends, she still carries with her the safety net: alimony, division of assets, child custody. The man, he keeps paying. He pays with money, he pays with mental health, he pays with years of life that never return. Freud didn't romanticize institutions. He already said, malaise is structural, and herein lies most men's blind spot. They believe they are choosing freely, when in fact they are obeying a symbolic mechanism that directs them to the altar. It's as if culture has programmed into the male unconscious the idea that being a real man means getting married, having children, and providing for others. It's the old bourgeois morality, disguised as happiness for two. If at first a man believes he is entering into a partnership, what he actually finds is the institutionalization of unilateral sacrifice. Romantic love, this cultural invention that Freud already identified as a disguise for desire, serves as the narrative that legitimizes imprisonment. It is the veil that hides the bars. Freud said, "We are not masters in our own house." The unconscious, silent and persistent, leads us to choices we believe to be free. A man falls in love, feels taken, surrendered. But this surrender is not only emotional, it is also social, economic and legal. Passion is the driving force, the contract is the prison. The initial flame of desire transforms into a symbolic shackle. Note the paradox. Marriage is presented as the ultimate achievement of mature masculinity. Now you're a real man, they say. But at the same time, marriage strips a man of the very things that define him: his freedom of movement, his power of choice, his spontaneous virility. He enters into marriage believing he's gaining status, but in practice he loses vitality. It's the same mechanism Freud identified in the myth of the superego, the entity that punishes, monitors, and controls. Modern marriage functions as an institutionalized superego. It's the voice that demands the provider, the exemplary husband, the present father. But, unlike the internal superego that punishes with guilt, here the punishment is material. Alimony, division of assets, alienation of children, loss of assets. The punishment is real, tangible, and devastating. And what's the solution? Many would say, love more, give more of yourself, talk better. But this is nothing more than a cover-up. The problem isn't communication, but the very structure of the institution. It's like trying to air out a prison cell by painting the walls. Psychoanalysis forces us to face the hard truth. Marriage today is not a space of freedom, but of psychic servitude, masquerading as Romanticism. And who pays the bill? Always him. The man is the condemned one who believes he's a volunteer. He works more, lives less, gets sick sooner. He carries the burden of social expectations, and when he dares to complain, he's silenced with ready-made phrases. A real man holds his own. Deep down, you like this responsibility. No, he doesn't. He's learned to endure it. Freud reminds us that human desire is insatiable. No woman, no relationship, no promise of happily ever after can fill the subject's structural void. But marriage promises just the opposite, an illusory completeness. The idea that finally, with her by her side, everything will make sense. This is where the great trap lies, seeking in the other what the unconscious has already declared impossible. And when this illusion crumbles, because it always does, the man discovers that he's not just losing a love. He's losing his home, children, money, time, health. He discovers that the love cell has become a legal battleground. And once again, he's the one who pays. He pays with interest. He pays with his own corroded psyche. Modern marriage isn't the moral failing of one person or another. It's not about blaming women individually. The point is deeper. It's a cultural mechanism, a civilizing pact that found the perfect scapegoat in men. They support the family, the state, and morality. And when you don't realize it, you're punished for failing in what should never have been your sole responsibility. Here's the disturbing Freudian revelation. Marriage is not a space of reciprocal love, but of shared neurosis. Her neurosis meets his neurosis. But when the cord snaps, it's always on the male side that the psyche bleeds the most. And the question remains, how long will men continue to accept the cell with a smile on their faces? How long will they continue to confuse shackles with rings? How long will they continue to believe that love justifies the absurd price of lost freedom? But psychoanalysis rips off the mask. It shows that marriage is less about union and more about unilateral renunciation. It's not about hating women nor demonizing the feminine, but about seeing the stark reality. Marriage is a psychic prison where the key is always on the outside, and the man himself locks the door. Modern marriage is the most sophisticated invisible prison civilization has ever built. A prison where there are no iron bars, but psychic chains. A prison where the cell is made of illusions and the key is always on the outside. A prison where a man enters smiling, believing he's achieving happiness, but in reality, he's merely accepting a lifelong sentence. This is what Freud, if he were to look at marriage today, would call a psychic prison. And it is in this scenario that psychoanalysis becomes the blade capable of cutting through the mask of romanticism to expose the raw reality. From an early age, culture teaches men that their natural destiny is to find a partner. Marry, start a family, and provide for themselves. This script is not an individual choice, but a collective imperative. Boys grow up hearing that they will only be complete when they have someone by their side. Songs repeat the fantasy of the other half. Movies sell the idea that happiness lies in building a home. Soap operas reinforce the myth of fulfillment through eternal union. It's a symbolic bombardment that instills in the male unconscious the need to seek validation through marriage. Freud had already shown that the individual is not their own master, that the unconscious governs life much more than reason. And here is the proof. Men believe they marry because they love, but deep down, they marry because they have been programmed to believe that only then will they be recognized as a true man. The promise is seductive: a stable home, a faithful partner, children who will give meaning to life, a secure routine. But what men find, in practice, is a contract disguised as love. Modern marriage is not about union. It's about control. It's about fixing desire, taming impulses, channeling vital energy toward an institution that benefits women and society more than men. By saying yes, men are not only making an emotional commitment, but also signing a civilizing pact that requires them to almost completely relinquish their freedom. Freud already explained that living in society requires renunciation. We must repress instincts, forego immediate gratification, and endure frustration. But marriage amplifies this renunciation. The man pays twice. He pays the state and culture with his civilized obedience, and he pays his wife with his unconditional devotion. Marriage, far from being the fulfillment of love, becomes the stage where male neurosis is exploited to the point of exhaustion. He doesn't realize it, but he is being crushed by a symbolic machine that drains his energy, his time, his money, and above all, his psychic vitality. And what is the woman's role? In this game? Culturally, she becomes the beneficiary of a contract that provides her with guarantees. If the marriage works, she is supported, protected, and cared for. If the marriage fails, she still receives legal protection, division of assets, alimony, and child custody. The man in any scenario continues to pay. He pays while in the relationship, he pays while out. The prison is so sophisticated that it extends even after release. Divorce, which should signify the end of a cycle, is often just the execution of a sentence. Here the brutal asymmetry is revealed. The man enters believing in partnership, but the system guarantees protection for only one side. Freud didn't romanticize love. He knew that human desire is insatiable, that no relationship can offer the fulfillment the unconscious seeks. Yet marriage sells the illusion that finally, with someone by their side, life will have meaning. This promise is a trap because when it collapses, and it always does, the man discovers that he is not only losing a relationship, but also assets, children, years of life. What seemed like a pact of love turns into a legal battle. What seemed like a union becomes a sentence. The psychological drama is even more cruel. The man internalizes the role of good husband as if it were an existential obligation. He begins to live divided between what he wants and what he owes. He desires freedom, but owes fidelity. He desires silence, but owes constant dialogue. He desires rest, but must be available. He desires subjection, but must deny himself to be recognized as the ideal partner. This conflict generates a neurosis that corrodes the soul. The constant tension between desire and duty manifests in anxiety, depression, alcoholism, and psychosomatic illnesses. The body pays the price of repression because what cannot be expressed finds outlet in the flesh. And when separation arrives, the situation doesn't improve. Divorce is sold as freedom, but for the man, it becomes an extension of his prison. Child custody is rarely granted to him in full. Alimony becomes an invisible chain that binds him to his ex-wife for decades, and the feeling of defeat takes hold like a deep narcissistic wound. Society applauds, as if it were natural. The man who dares to complain is ridiculed. You chose to get married. A real man pays alimony. Now be responsible. Few realize that this responsibility isn't the result of choice, but of a mechanism that has always pushed him into the cell. Freud, when discussing the superego, already showed how civilization creates a punitive force within the individual. In marriage, this superego takes shape. It's the wife's voice demanding more dedication, the voice of society demanding more responsibility, the voice of the law demanding more money. Man lives surrounded by voices that punish him constantly. There is no silence, no pause, no room to breathe. Married life becomes the stage for continuous punishment. And the great lie keeps being repeated. Make it work. Try harder. Love more. Talk more. As if the problem was simply a lack of communication. It isn't. The problem lies in the structure. Marriage doesn't fail because people fail. It fails because it was born doomed to failure. It's an institution that tries to unite love and desire, when Freud had already made it clear that these two cannot coexist stably. Where there is love, desire fades. Where there is desire, love weakens. Marriage, by promising, both at the same time manufactures its own downfall, and in this process, man pays the highest price. He pays with his youth, his energy, his mental health, his creative capacity. He pays with his life. Marriage becomes the socially accepted version of the death drive Freud described. The man who marries without realizing it signs his own certificate of self-destruction. It is the respectable, morally accepted way of renouncing oneself until death. But it is precisely here that psychoanalysis can be a weapon of liberation, not by offering magic formulas, but by offering lucidity, showing men that they don't have to follow the script imposed on them, that they can refuse the cell disguised as an alliance, that they can experience desire without submitting to the contract. It's not about hating women, it's about rejecting an institution that no longer serves men, but consumes them. It's about reclaiming their status as subjects and ceasing to be the condemned man who alone sustains a failed structure. Psychoanalysis doesn't promise solace, it promises truth. And the truth is that modern marriage is a psychic prison where only the man serves his sentence, a sentence disguised as love, wrapped in promises of happiness, but which deep down is the silent condemnation of male vitality. With each "I do" said at the altar, with each signature at the registry office, the gears of repetition are renewed. And men continue to enter voluntarily, smiling for the camera, unaware that they've just locked themselves inside. The only way out is awareness. It's the courage to look beyond the veil, to reject the romantic narrative, to face the loneliness that the unconscious reveals. It's the courage to admit that eternal love is a fiction, that marriage is a prison, and that life can only be lived with dignity if man learns to say no. No to the machinery, no to the cell, no to the invisible contract that turns him into a scapegoat. And when this doesn't resonate, when man finally understands the trap, he opens space for a new form of existence, one where desire doesn't need to be shackled, where love can be lived without being a contract, where life isn't a punishment to be served, but a path to be explored. This channel doesn't romanticize. This channel doesn't tell fairy tales. This channel doesn't peddle illusions. This is psychoanalysis in its veins.